Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Welcome to Merryn Talks Your Money, the personal finance edition of Merryn Talks Money. In these bonus podcasts, we talk about the best strategies for making the most of your money. I'm Merryn Somerset Webb, and with me, senior reporter and money distilled author, John Stepek. Hi.
Hi.
Right, so this week we are answering a question from Mike.
I'd love to know your thoughts on the possible risks in having all of your DC pension invested in one fund, such as, for example, the Vanguard Life Strategy Fund, given that the FSCS limits are only 85,000. I've kind of thought about this as my pension pot has increased. I've wondered if it should be spread around a number of similar passive funds from different providers.
Gosh, well, there's quite a lot in here, because it's not really about one fund, it's about one provider, isn't it, John?
Well, the FSCS is basically where you go if all else fails. And so say your broker goes bust, say the platform that you're on goes bust. And then not only that, it turns out it goes bust and your money isn't where it should be. Because the key thing, if you're using a platform like Hargreaves Lansdown or Interactive Investor, for example, then your assets should be separated so that even if the platform provider breaks down, then your money is there somewhere. And then it's just a matter of tracing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely key. So yeah, everything that you hold in an ISA or a pension or anything like that is effectively held in a kind of trust structure for you. So whatever goes wrong at the broker, that structure still exists and your money is still inside it. So you only run into a problem where you might need backup from the FCFC if there's some kind of fraud involved or your money has been moved out of these trust structures into something else, right? So it's incredibly unlikely that if your broker were to go bust, which does happen, if your broker were to go bust, you might need recourse to them. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is unlikely. I mean, it would be a hassle and a nightmare if your broker goes bust. And brokers do go bust. Smaller brokers, over the years, writing about this stuff, there's always, every kind of like 3 or 4 years, there's usually a story about some broker that most people probably haven't heard of. And often what happens, one of the problems is that even if there isn't actual fraud, and sometimes there is fraud, but if there isn't fraud, there's sometimes just really sloppy paperwork. And, the people who have got to go to the FSCS end up having to wait for ages. That's broadly speaking what this is for. And really, I do think that this is a really good question because it's not like, it's a similar thing with bank accounts. So we all remember the financial crisis and how everyone actually got clued up on the FSCS very quickly after that. And we all know that you shouldn't hold more than £85,000 with any one bank, sort of like banking group, per person, because if your bank did end up having a run on it and there was another 2008 situation, then you're only covered up to the 85,000, except in certain minimal circumstances.
And something to say there, by the way, is that if you have cash, right, if you have cash at Hargreaves Lansdown or one of the other brokers in one of those sort of active saving schemes, whatever it is, that money is likely to be spread across different banks as well, and it's 85,000 for each of those.
Yeah, and that's worth checking. If you're worried about it, then you should check with your platform exactly how it does that. And most of the platforms will explain that to you. There probably should be something on their website, but if you can't find it, then just email and ask them about it.
Well, here, listen, I'll read you the bit from Hargreaves Lansdown website. Money you have in an ISA or a fund or a share account is held in legally separate trust accounts across a range of UK regulated banks. This means your cash is held separately to HL's cash and it is reconciled daily. So that's the basics there.
A reputable platform will keep an eye on all this stuff. This is something you really do have to consider. If you're someone who does have more than £85,000, and frankly, if you have a pension that's going to be worth, that's going to fund you in retirement, then you probably will have a pension that's worth more than £85,000.
Yeah.
And although things like brokers going bust doesn't happen very often, this is one good reason why you do need to keep an eye on the solvency of your broker. And the easiest way to do that is to use one of the big ones for at least part of your pension pot, even if you've got a broker that you prefer that's, smaller or more obscure or cheaper or whatever. Because one of the important things with this kind of situation is how politically sensitive it is. And if you can sit there and say, this company that I am invested with, would it going bust be a front page headline scandal story? If the answer is yes, then that's actually an extra layer of protection for you, because politicians will react if that happens. Whereas if it's just some piddly wee relatively recent startup that nobody else knows about, then you are going to be on your own as far as, getting your money back goes beyond the kind of FSCS limits. So I think that's a really important element to think about if you are someone who's in the situation of, being able to think about this.
Of course, that's not what startup brokers want to hear, is it? That there are these massive moats around the big guys for that very reason. But I agree with you. It's one of the reasons to have a big name broker. Interestingly, though, I still have my assets spread across 3 different organizations.
I think that's sensible.
4, actually, come to think of it. Simply because of admin. God, I hate admin. And I can't imagine having all my assets held on one platform, it going bust, and then 2 years of admin and form filling and all that. I don't think I could stand it.
Oh, they'd be hellish. And it's just there's different levels of hell. There's the level of hell where you have to wait 2 years for your assets, and there's a level of hell where your assets actually weren't there anymore.
That's the worst layer of hell. I don't think any of the organizations I'm with would get me into that situation. But, who knows? Never say never. Terrible things happen out there in the world of money. We know that.
No, absolutely. And I think the other point to answer Mike's question specifically, actually the question he's asking is a little bit easier to my mind, because really what he's talking about is having it all in one fund. And don't get me wrong, Vanguard falls very squarely into the headline, political protection kind of company. If that went bust, then that would definitely be a front page story. But, it's very easy to just put some of your money into a different passive fund that is doing basically the same thing. That's a fairly low admin solution. I can see why you might not want to have more than one pension platform if you're only just over the limit and you're like, oh God, I hate the admin and I don't want to move money to you and I don't want to do this. But with that's just a pretty straightforward matter of taking a chunk of your pension money and putting it in a slightly different index fund.
I just think, I would never just rely on one fund for everything. Vanguard Life Strategy Fund, this is a well-established strategy, it's a well-established company, but why would you put everything into one thing? Ever. Right? I don't think that the Vanguard Life Strategy Fund is going to end up being wound down. I don't think it's going to not have enough assets in it to be viable. None of those things are likely to happen. But again, why not just have a couple of different things?
Yeah, I think it is one of those questions that, at a very basic level, just don't have all your eggs in one basket. Also, the more eggs you've got, the more baskets you're going to require if you want to be able to sleep soundly. And obviously, you can take...
Hang on, eggs, baskets. How many... as you get more eggs, you need more baskets. Is that...
Yes,
that's what you're saying?
I think that's fair,
yeah.
Yes.
Diversify. Have a couple of baskets, move the eggs around them.
I think it's possible to get probably overly neurotic about this, but the deeper you want to go into it, I have to say, I'm not, loath as I am to mention the competition. The Monevator blog is very good on this stuff for people who want to go deep down into, exactly which kinds of funds are protected and all that sort of stuff. As I say, I think you can it would probably be easy to get a bit too neurotic about this, but at the same time, it's definitely something you should think about. Certainly, especially if you are going with small, more vulnerable providers, then you should be paying more attention to this stuff. If you do have all your money with big brand names that have got that, headline protection, then you can probably be a bit more relaxed about it. But if it's anything off-piste, then just make sure you know what you're doing.
And just be clear that, you can, not this particular ETF, but other ETFs, they do get delisted, they do get wound down, and then you do wait for a bit for your money to come back. But it does come back, and it's the same with investment trusts, for example. Every now and then they get wound down, right? And then the money will turn up in your bank account eventually, and the same with the other types of funds. Okay, but one thing to add to that, John, and I think you know about this, is that you do not get FSCS protection anyway for investment trusts and ETFs. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's moving into the neurotic territory if you're worrying about that too much, I think.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. But the last thing I want to mention is just to be absolutely clear, you will not get any compensation from the FSCS or indeed from anybody else if you just make a bad choice. If you choose a terrible fund and it falls 90%, I'm afraid that's on you. Bad choices have consequences. So let's try not to make too many of those. Thanks for listening to this week's Merryn Talks Your Money. If you like our show, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to follow me and John on X or Twitter at MerrynSW and John_Stepek. This episode was produced by Sam Asadi, production support and sound design by Moses Andam. Questions and comments on this show and all our shows are always welcome. Our show email is merrynmoney@bloomberg.net.